So I'm very happy to have Professor Ashwani Saith with us in this talk. Let me start with a quick introduction of Professor Saith. So Professor Ashwani Saith is Emeritus Professor at the International Institute of Social Studies at the University of Rotterdam in The Hague. He's Dean Emeritus, School of Liberal Studies at the BML Mondial University. Professor Saith's research and publications cover a wide range of topics, including official poverty measurement methodologies, Millennium Sustainable Development Goals, comparative institutional analysis of China and India, policy frameworks for social economic security, structural change, macroeconomic reforms, democracy, populism, plutarchy. So it's a very long list of topics. He has worked closely with organizations like SIWA in Ahmedabad, MV Foundation Hyderabad on gender empowerment and the elimination of child labor. His recent research focuses on the history of economic thought, particularly on the evolution of Cambridge economics in the post-Keynesian era and Asian economic development with a comparative focus on China and India since 1980. So, Professor, thanks a lot for making it to the AUC. And without further ado, I give you the floor, please.
Thank you for this. Yes. Can I leave from the? Can I leave the table? Does that work? They're recording. Sorry. Okay. So right. So I'm delighted to be here. To have the pleasure of interacting with many groups at ACUL. This is my last engagement here, and especially happy to talk to another group of young people. ACUL itself is very nice. You can find your way from point A to point B. But you get lost, you see a lot of nice architecture anyway. And you see fruit trees and everything else, but you might miss a class. Okay, so today, we have time is limited. The topic is very wide. It's on human development, on the paradigm, and I would like to share with you a few critical thoughts on this. I'll try and keep it to about half an hour, and that should be less than half an hour for questions and some observations from you. Human development is I'm talking about the human development paradigm. I'm not talking about human development in itself. So I'm not, the critiques or the points I make are not to say that human development is not a good thing. I say that especially because yesterday I was talking about inequality, and I made a lot of observations which were criticizing inequality. But one of the respected people who was there in the audience thought I was defending inequality all the time. So I want to make it very clear that I'm going to be not making a critique of the idea of human development per se, but of the human development paradigm and its role in the way we think and we do things. So that's a distinction that we're making. Human development, but I mean, that's I think. Said before, it's like sort of mother's milk, who would be against it, apart from that Swiss company, maybe Nestle, who have shares in milk powder, and so on and so forth. But even there, it's going to come around for it. I think that development is a good thing. I want to say a few comments about the origin of this human development paradigm. Where did it come from? And what was this motivation? it comes to the focus of human development comes up as a critique of the notion of GNP, gross national product, GDP, as a measure of welfare. We are these days in every economy in the world. They are driven by the idea that success is measured in terms of the rate of growth of GDP. Oh, we are growing, that economy is growing 7%, 6%, that will happen. So it's doing very well. If your GDP is much higher, then of course you are better than something with GDP is a bit lower. So that GDP becomes a measure of welfare. Now, this notion has been critiqued for a very long time. And the original criticism of this, of course, we will find that going a very long way back, but the first systematic, holistic critique of GDP came up with an economist called Pigou in Cambridge, and he wrote a book on the economics of welfare. And that's also the origins of modern welfare economics. Origins in the sense that those ideas were there long before, but putting it together into a textbook, yes, economics of welfare is taken to be a marker. And in that, he has a very major critique of GDP as a measure of welfare. And his argument is that those things, the kind of steps which are there, the processes which are there to increase material welfare through goods and services, which go to measure of GDP. He said the very process in which you do that also sets off other processes and effects which take away, which are negative in terms of the effects on social welfare. So he said if you take the two together, you have an indeterminate situation. And it's so GDP is not a good measure of welfare. He has other criticisms also for what you measure, what you do not measure. But women's work is not measured in the past. Yeah, it's beyond, it's not part of the production frontier, it's not included. So that seems to be quite wrong. If you were to cut all the trees that you actually sell them, the loss of your green cover would not be counted as a loss, but the income that you get from it would be counted as a loss. Yeah. So if a woman goes out to work, the same work which she's doing at home, if you're at home, not your parents, your work is not covered. But if you go and look up the parents of the neighbor, when they pay you something, that is covered. Yeah. So it's commercialization of the activity is important. And people has a famous line where he says that there was this Cambridge Don fellow who, and when you live in a college, you have somebody who comes to do to clean the room. And he married his housekeeper. And so he said the GDP went down. Because otherwise she would be paid, and now she's not being paid, so the GDP went down. But there's a problem about GDP. If you take children out from school and you put them in child labor, yeah, you find that GDP is gone up, but education has gone down. Yeah, if you were to sell an animal because there's a crisis of health in a poor family, and to actually pay for the health of your mother or your father or something, the expenditure on health goes up, and so GDP goes up. Actually, you're left without an asset, and so there are things in this where GDP has many problems in it. But for Pigou, the main problem, which you also mentioned, was that when you say that you produce something and there is a certain contribution in net value terms, that is done on the basis of profitability and cost to the individual. An individual has a transaction, does something, produces something, and there are certain costs and there are certain profits which come up. And you only measure the things which are affecting you. So if you're an entrepreneur, you only look at yourself and say, this is actually my cost, this is my profit. But the activity that you do can have many consequences for others. So if you have your activities for contribution, it is making a negative outcome for somebody else. So that's not being counted. And it could be a positive thing as well. So these are what they call externalities. They call them external because they're external to the transaction, the narrow transaction, which is there as an economic transaction. So he says, because you cannot include these, and they're not included in all this. So GDP is not really like this. So GDP had a lot of critiques in this regard. Later on, it came from, including people like Saith, the human development paradigm. You can say the modern version started, supposed to be dated to, everything starts somewhere these days. They started here, they started there. They started in 1990 in the UNDP when they started their human development reports. And they created a human development index. which of course you must know HDI. And they did that, and that actually then dominated. Every year there's a report of the market index, which is country-wise. And you can see your countries here, it went up, it went down, and so on and so forth. That index covers health, education, and GDP. Health is covered, you can have longevity, and you have education in terms of some sort of set of variables for different levels of education. And then there is also GDP per capita that's included. Now, so here I want to say a word about this HDI business. It came up from ACUL, who's a Pakistani economist who was also in the UNDP as a senior person. He started the World Human Development Reports and what I would say the paradigm as it became. And Professor Sen and he were together as students, they were very close friends. And so Amartya Sen, Nobel Prize winner, you know, a philosopher, economist, and everything else, he came into this idea and said, the idea was that the critique of what Sen has called a money metric approach. The money metric approach is the GDP approach. If you have the money, GDP is very basically money. If you have the money, you have the well-being, you have the welfare, you can go and buy it. And what was being said by them was that if you have money, it doesn't necessarily translate into good human development outcomes at the end. Why? Because you may have money, but you may not be able to access health. You may have money, but you may not send your children to school. The girls don't go, or something else. So there's a big gap, or maybe that you have a bias in terms of sending girls to school. It may be that you're in India, you're from a lower caste, and there are some problems about caste, but participation in some activities, which still happens here and there. Or it could be there is no school nearby. Or it could be girls don't go to school because there are no separate facilities for girls. And they're not, so as soon as the girl reaches the age of age, they don't want to send the girl, and there might be security issue. They can't go from this village to another village, but it's, because their secondary school is there. So there could be many reasons why. When you have money in your pocket, it doesn't automatically translate into human development at the other end. So for that reason, they said instead of having this indirect measure, if you have money, your welfare, you should have a direct measure, which you just ask the person directly, are you educated? What is your level of education? Is your bodily health good? So you look at, well, it could be anthropometric measures, it could be other measures, but you look directly at the outcomes on the human person. That's a human development approach. And then you say, it doesn't matter whether you have money or not, we see that you have human development. So we should see the end result, not the indirect process, because this money thing has too many problems in it. That's the kind of an idea which comes up, and do the measure, HDI, which goes up. So it's a critique of the gateway approach, which is why I said when you have HDI and you have health and education or longevity, that's fine. But when you then bring it also with a third variable, GDP per capita, to income, then the question is that's again money feeding in back into the human development sort of our index. And that logic has never been properly explained by them. Right? It goes on this way, round and round, but it appreciates the purity of the idea that you have there, about money metric approaches. That's one kind of a thing I want to say at the start about this. The other thing is that, of course, there's a bit slightly, the question of assumption and where the history of ideas. I told you about people who really started off in 1915 with thinking of GDP, but the idea of human development in these terms is not new. Is really around there for a while. So I just mentioned two to you. In the 1960s in Geneva, there was an institute, United Nations Institute of Research, Social Development. They had a big project. If I'm not mistaken, someone will correct me. The director was John McCann. He was I think, American or Canadian. And they had a big project on social indicators. Because they had the same idea that you do not have GDP is not a good enough measure. And so you should have a direct measure of social indicators. And that the person who was the key researcher there at that time was a Polish economist, Jan Trudnowski. And Jan Trudnowski was brought there by Jan Kimball, who was a Nobel Prize winner, that person, a very highly respected peacenik and also very social-minded, deeply democratic economist. So he was concerned about this, and Jan Trudnowski worked there, developed a book there, which is on measures for measurement of social indicators, which was sort of pathbreaking at that time. It was new. just new. When combined with the work also on risk by other scholars there are several other scholars, and you find there, you go to the library, we check it out, there's a whole body of work, but this is ignored by the UNDP. It finds no mention, it's sort of 1990, they've got something there. And later on in 1979, there is an American economist, Morris, who wrote before he created a new index called the Physical Quality of Life Index. And the Physical Quality of Life Index, he has this chapter 2 in his book, is actually a critique of GDP, saying the GDP is not good enough, exactly the same topic. And he says, what should we do? What are 3 indicators? He has, if I'm not mistaken, longevity, he has infant mortality, and he has literacy. So there's education, and there is longevity, and the third one, you would say, oh, are they the same? No, they're not the same, because infant mortality is actually measuring access to health systems, children survive or not. But longevity is a product of many others. Anyhow, so the indicator of this was there. That's also ignored. So 1990 is the last point. It takes off. And so this really goes into the stratosphere. And of course, the human paradigm comes up in there in every way. Now, that's the thing. I want to ask the question, and I'm going to be a little bit provocative and raise issues about this whole paradigm which has taken over. This paradigm, so there's a human development report from produced in the UNDP. Virtually every country in the world has a country development report. In India, we have most of the states have state human development reports. And then, of course, this has gone further. The critique of it, you get the Millennium Development Goals. Then you come to the Sustainable Development Goals, which actually now are so many that if you throw them up in the air, it got dark, you lose light, you best to drop this out. And if you have hardly numbers, definition problems, protection problems, that very much are there. And they of course become the I think they are bureaucratic devices. The bureaucratic mind likes to have a target and to have a thing we can move on a question in serious ways. So it's what's your number? You get a number, and the government says your report has to come up. So it's a bit like this. I'm not a great believer in this. I've written a paper on MDGs, which if you're interested in thinking about this thing and not being carried away and wasting your time on this, then please read that paper. I can send it to, yeah. So it's so there's this aspect of human development has gone everywhere, and that's the paradigm. So you must all the time be looking at human development. Yes, human development, but the paradigm. So where is my grouse with it? I don't have so much time to go to various aspects of it, but I would say to you, human development, this 1990 now, it's already 35 years that we've had this. It came up at a time when the neoliberal framework had really taken root. 1990 is quite late in that. It started off in the 1970s. The shock of the price hike really led to a lot of debt in many, many third world countries. That debt had meant that the doors were open to that money lending concern based in Washington. There are 2 of them, Bretton Woods institutions. They came as money lenders. Money lenders always say, if you don't do this, I take this. If you do this, I do that. And there are a lot of list of conditionalities, but that's how it happens. So everybody, one size fits all, that business came in. And you have that approach dealing through stabilization policies, which are really also like austerity policies, but this go down, debt is not really allowed, except your debt which you pay to the banks. And you actually, fiscal space is limited, national policy space is limited, privatization, that will happen, and so government state has to put out. So that's the privatization, financialization of everything. That's kind of a broad approach which came up. Unions and trade unions should be out. They are interfering with the market setting of factor wages, of factor prices, and all this. So that was in 1982 was a major year in that. But this was when a report was produced by in the bank I think the world person. This was about Africa and agriculture. And the report gave us because this basic prescription, I get the prices right. So everything was about prices. So if we get the prices right, things will happen, things will move. Second thing there was, we must actually, people must have control over every transaction, and they should be able to produce according to the market. But if it's some cooperative arrangement or some other kind that interferes with incentives, with being able to understand costs and prices, privatization of land, tightening of land was a major project which happened in Africa. Cooperative lands were meant to be converted into private titles. A lot of things happened there. So that it was that kind of an approach which was happening, and it's in that kind of a background that you have the human development approach coming from the UNDP, saying look, focus on human development. And I think from that point is very progressive. Okay, so that I like your listeners. I should also say to you, this is one buzzword. I'm saying that time, they've become a bit of a buzzword. That's what I've said in my description of the lecture. But the other buzzwords as well, which come before this. And they are concepts, they are interventions, and they become buzzwords in some form. Let me just share one or two with you. We had a Green Revolution. I've heard the Green Revolution everywhere. Yes. The Green Revolution was meant to remove poverty in the rural sector. Yeah, that was the idea. Of course, it was based on the land. You didn't have land. The seed technology didn't help you very much. So you had to prove then that, yes, the increase in productivity will get through to labor, which didn't always happen because there was mechanization as well. So, so there was a big thing about, okay, there's a Green Revolution, but does it really get through to the poor or not? And so there were a lot of studies, and again, from Geneva and the ILO, also from August, was Andrew Pierce, who did it for Latin American peasants, his famous study for Latin America. And there was Dasgupta did something for India. So that's it, and Keith Griffin then wrote his famous book, Economy of Growth. And that set up the critique of the Green Revolution, and that entered the ILO, where Keith Griffin was, as an incarnation of this came out from Himmat Tharampai, who was from not Kenya, he was from Uganda. They set up the basic needs idea. So there was the basic needs line which they set up. They said that we want to see whether their basic needs are met. Basic needs is a bit like human development, education, health, housing, this, that, food, nutrition. So they set up the basic needs line. Nothing arbitrary, country-wise, but still something. They said how many people are below it, above it, distribution of income, what happened before and after the Green Revolution, did it help or not? So that was a kind of an idea. It was a radical idea. Because it was challenging at that point in time, the idea that technological intervention can solve the social problems of inequality and poverty. So that was very radical. Very soon after that, when I said to you, this whole, the neoliberalism and structural adjustment comes in, that role of the ILO of being able to raise these sorts of issues, also through about employment, was a crucial factor, World Employment Report, World Employment Program. But I mean, that's something we can leave out of the time being. That when this goes away, and then you have the domination of the Bretton Woods institutions, they basically say that, look, and here is a neoliberal economics, neoclassical economics coming in, that employment is not a target. Employment is something first of all, you make factors of production free to interact. There should be no interference in markets. And then the markets people will decide what to invest in, how much to invest and what to produce and how to produce. When you do all that, then you will find how much employment will be created, how much capital will be employed. I mean, that's logic. I mean, this is sort of a 101 kind of thing. So employment cannot be a target. Employment comes out in the wash. It's a downstream effect. So then with this idea, you say to the ILO, what do you mean employment is a target and employment program? You're interfering with the market in this way. So I say your job in the ILO is technical cooperation on various aspects of rights of labor, things like this. Don't get stressed about employment. This is not your job. That job is done by Washington, and they don't focus on employment. They focus on actually getting the economy to match what they think are the conditions of the free market so that it improves whatever will happen in the economy. So basic needs started off being very radical concept and then disappeared. And what in this place from the World Bank, what a dollar a day like. So it was a dollar a day, that becomes a poverty line. It's used across the globe, more or less. And the idea is you should target people below the poverty line. So it became an approach of targeting. So it became, this is where absolute poverty line, whereas basic needs for, say, what's happening to basic needs is being used as an indicator of an approach, whether it's working or not. And if it's not working, you ask all kinds of questions about land reform, about land, nature of technology, distribution, financial systems and so on, marketing and all that. Whereas here, the idea was how many people are below the $1 a day line? Those are the people the government can target for poverty reduction programs. But for the rest of all the other things, leave it to the market. So even things like agricultural extension agencies were privatized or left out, completely taken out. So this is what happened through the WHO and so on. So that was a kind of an approach where it disappears. The ILO also comes up then with another approach is social exclusion. Yeah, that's another, and then they come up with another term, decent work, which is effectively looking at the same type of thing as basic needs, because here it brings in the question of rights of labor and conditions of labor, things like this. But it's productive labor is again through employment, through access to employment, which has to guarantee the outcome in development terms. Now, so one after the other, we have these buzzwords which organizations seem to need to justify, legitimize their organizational, existence, and especially when they're dependent on money outside in a big way. And I think the biggest thing here for the UNDP, which was broke, by the way, didn't have money for very much at this time, very much dependent on American contributions, which were withheld from other international agencies to discipline them. There's always a kind of a ballot which could be turned this way or that. But they came up with this paradigm, and this really put UNDP in the center that this is the way we should be going. Now, so that's the point where it entered. And my question for them is, some of them are very, you could say minor, but I think they are still important for us to understand. I'm going to make only 2 points here. There are more that I need to. One is about the Human Development Index. And there are 3 variables in it. Okay, so I won't go into the technicalities of how those things are measured and defined. So let's say health, education, and income. Okay, so just take those 3 as being the labels. I won't go into the details of how education indicators are combined. So, and there are lots of weaknesses between the original concept and the way that the number enters the index. There's a lot of loss of meaning in terms of how you go from the original concept to a concept which can be defined as something which is comparable, from the concept to something which has a variable in national accounts which gives a number against it, how that number is actually derived. So there are lots of weaknesses in it. At every stage, there's a loss of meaning, but leave that aside. So you have these 3 indicators, you combine them, equal weights. So there's a list, divide by 3. There's a way of scaling in all this. I won't bore you with all these. And then you say, where do you come up? You get a number. And the number typically would be, say, you get a rank. You get this. So that rank, you get some number. On that number basis, combined number, all countries can be ranked. You go from right to the top to the bottom. Now, this raises the question. Then everybody says, well, see, and see where you are. That's an encouragement to focus on human development. But let me give you an example here. You have a country in which GDP is very high. Yeah, but health and education are bad. You have another country where GDP is much lower, but health and education are good. And they wind up with the same, let's say, the same number. You have lost your ability to discriminate one from the other. You can't get. I say that, so you cannot say one is better than the other without actually saying what really is happening inside that index. So you have to break it out to begin with. Well, what are the 3 separate ones? And you see, is it coming from health or is it coming from the GDP? Now, GDP, we've already done a critique of. I already said to you why we included it. So if it's coming from GDP, it's not a great idea. GDP is not meant to be a great thing for as a measure of welfare. So this becomes an issue. And I think combining these things in this way is leads to a situation where you have a loss of ability to discriminate on the other. So let's not only way to find out is that disaggregating it. But if only you can find out that disaggregation, then why aggregating it in the first place? Then why do you have that in there? But that was the big selling point. Okay, so that's one. Take another situation, the same country. I take India or whatever. Supposing the human development index is improved. Yeah, the value has gone up, so you say, oh, we are doing better. Are we doing better because we have an 8% growth rate? Or are we doing better because health and education is improved? You can't tell. By looking at the indicators, you can't tell. So again, you're going to say, oh, please break it up. I want to see your indicators. But if you keep breaking it up all the time, why do you combine it in the first place? So this kind of a combination, this is also for advocacy, because there becomes a race that people will do this. This is an insult to people's intellectual abilities that you combine it, so then you can say that there's a stupid index, but I'm judged by the stupid index, and so on. Carry on, my actions will be determined by the stupidity. So I hear a person with like Babu Gulab, Professor said, who are pretty supporting this. And I think the critique became so strong that eventually, later with some later years, Professor Stan Atkins sort of, break ranks a little bit with his friend. His friend had died not coming back. And he said, oh, some other people forced it on me. I was not ready for it. But this is the way it happened. He didn't say anything all the way along. But it was report after report, so it became the thing that was going around. So that's one comment which I wanted to make to you, that it's, as an indicator, it's not very great. The second thing I want to make, and then I'll stop there, is I said to you this happened against the backdrop of neoliberalism, of the structural adjustments on the earlier round, and this whole drift. And now, here's a project that which has brought me here, with Professor Ibrahim Nawaz and with Dr. Amrani. And so this is got to do with the new international economic order, and looking at how the global economy is going maybe the wrong direction. Can something be done to restore, the position of the South, economies, and so on, and all this. So that's kind of the background. And the focus on this always comes up to the idea: what is the nature of the growth process? Can we change? Because what we are getting is inequality. And now, the world inequality is rising greatly. Social exclusions are very high. Some of the countries have high growth rates. But the net outcome is that this model doesn't deliver very much in this way. So, against that background, we have a human development paradigm which has never asked the question: if the index is high or low, what is your statement about the economic model of neoliberalism? In all those reports, you go from beginning to end, the only thing that you get is give more money to the social sectors. And there was that famous book by Francis Stewart and John Cormier, right at the start of this whole business structural adjustment program, which said structural adjustment with a human face. But we don't want a human face. Well, that looks like a mask. It looks like a structural adjustment with a mask. So distracting your attention with a human face. So you give it a bit more money, and that's fine. So that's not good enough. So the model, which is actually generating over 40 years outcomes which are unsatisfactory, the logic of that model, the rational, the driving force of that model is not being challenged or questioned. And there's nothing to supplement that. We need an alternative strategy. All that has been measured is the downstream impact which comes out in the form of this indicator, which is very dubious. Now, because it's so dubious, every second or third time a year, there is some correction to this in the next human development report. But it's not really given up. So there is a where's inequality. Oh, we can have the inequality adjusted. Oh, but women are not this. Oh, we can have a gender version of this. Something else, whatever the environment. Yes, so we can bring in something that keeps going on like this. At the end, it becomes like a really curious creation. So I think this is, to my mind, it had good intentions. That's why I say DE-SAC had good intentions. But a DE-SAC is something a bit like I discovered the definition of DE-SAC in AUC in the last week. You go from here, you come back. You go from there, you come back. And you can't go from here to some other part of town, to some other part of the university, or going to the bookstore, get coming back to something else. That's cul-de-sac. So you're going around with human development in my hands, and I keep going round and round, and I'm looking for an alternative model of development. For some model of development, which is actually telling me why has this outcome repeatedly coming this way. And that is the focus which is going away. Now, if you do this over 30 or 40 years, then I think I'm entitled to ask the question, is this an intervention which doesn't have an ideological aspect to it? Should it not be critiqued as an ideological intervention in development? So supposing you're on the side of the Bretton Woods institutions, you would say, wonderful, you carry on with this, but don't critique the neoliberal model. Maybe that was said in the terms of, who knows what happens. But if you go too far in that track, maybe some money will be turned off, something will happen. I have no idea what these things, how these happen. But they have not really ever gone in with a full blast thing saying, we have a direct critique of this thing. So indirectly, something will be able to come out. There were more critiques of development, which were coming from the World Development Report in some ways, than the work on the Human Development Report itself, which kept focusing on the indicators and indicators. A lot of statistics there, but it didn't enlighten us, which is the reason why I think the kind of project that you're doing about the causations of why these things don't happen. I think that causal aspect, the pathology of it, is missing. Yeah. So that's my take on it. I think this is it's a general way in which radical ideas come up. And the radical ideas are then slowly watered down, critiqued, and then they're slowly absorbed into the mainstream narrative which they were criticizing in the first place. And then the critique becomes a little bit more qualified, but it also becomes more fortified because it now can protect itself against this radical idea which came up. Then another one comes up, and then you interpret it on the basis. So this is the kind of logic. The dotted daylight comes to something else, And human development, unfortunately, in my view, has performed that kind of function, not by intent from people who said, oh, that's why I said it's good intentions, but it's gone around this way. So that was the kind of idea. I thought young minds, before they get swept away by these paradigms and notions and buzzwords, there should be some inoculation when this happens, something goes at the back of your head, something. So I thought I'd be that mosquito which buzzes around your ears when you read these sort of texts. If you want more Spanish thing of this, there are other pieces I can say. So I don't know, do we have time for discussion? I haven't got the door. Yes, we do. So, but there's more to say, but I think that's enough. Really,
Thank you very much, Professor. As usual, it's quite intriguing, really, the way you approach things as story, as a narrative. I think that you have outlined at least two main takes here. One is the life cycle of what you call buzzwords. There is a life cycle. It's true that might tell us about the evolution, even though evolution might be a good word, because in that sense it indicates a smooth trajectory that is taken. Whereas you have talked about many ruptures, many unintended consequences of how these, but also the political economy of knowledge production and dissemination in the field of development, and for that matter, economics or political science. So this is something that I think that many of the students should consider next when they read or they study some of the paradigms that you're saying that you're talking about. The other thing that I find extremely fascinating is the attempt at standardizing things so that eventually we can put Egypt, India, assume first of all, of course, that these are honored somehow, so that eventually India can produce 5 or 6 figures. And these are put next to the 5 or 6 figures that are produced by China or Egypt or whatever. And this is amazing because this is what sets the scene eventually for how we make sense of otherwise extremely complex realities. We need to approach them somehow, but then it creates also a field for contention about how we construct our problems, how we are expected to come up with solutions. So I think that these are both rhyme very well with the dynamism with which you approach the story of how these basic concepts of human development have evolved. Please, the floor is open. If you have any comments, please, can you just like introduce yourself very quickly and then go ahead with you need a mic as well because we are recording this.
My name is Mohammed Hassan. I'm a philosophy graduate student at DC. And my question is a bit long, so I read it. First of all, thank you for the talk. My question is, do you think the introduction of HDI in the human development paradigm with its underlying assumption of quantifying and financializing human development does not only flatten human value, but also dehumanize what it is like to be a human developing in the sense that it internalized this tendency towards quantification? And by that I mean what a philosopher like Byung-Chul Han would call this shift between being a subject, a disciplinary, who is living in a disciplinary society in the Foucauldian sense, wherein you are trying to be free in the factory or the school or the prison. And nowadays we are just overachievers. We are just we are all becoming entrepreneurs in banks, in the gym, in airports. We are just trying to overachieve and to increase everything. Like, you think that this is correlated with the burnout society? You think it's correlated? Like, this paradigm is correlated with the burnout society?
With the what society?
The burnout society.
Oh,
Yeah. This tendency to over.
burnout. Right?
Yeah.
Burnout.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, let's collect a couple of more questions and then we can get back to it.
Okay, I just have an impression that neoliberalism has a great ability to co-opt or to transform every radical socialist projects or critiques to capitalism and transform them to another features that serve the interests of the neoliberal project itself. For instance, they co-opted the idea of cooperatives and transformed them to profit-oriented firms. And you are talking now about how neoliberalism co-opted the critiques from Bigot and others to the GDP and so on, and co-opted them to such a human development paradigm. So, what is the secret in neoliberalism? Why they always able to succeed in this process, and how to avoid such process in the future? We need to go beyond neoliberalism.
Any other questions?
Urge to be given to the students.
Yes.
So I have two observations showing. Very interesting that the model allows for the production of poverty and then wants to reduce it. So it's quite interesting. So the poverty is completely legitimate since you want to produce it, it's difficult to talk. So thank you very much for saying this. I think I will learn about what you said, bureaucratization. And I think this is perfect neoliberalization. This is the transposition of public management, of management approaches to the public sphere. And it becomes public management, and we have seen this creeping into, I have seen this in the last 20 years, creeping into how international organizations are managed, and then how universities are managed. Not only universities. Quite interesting, quantifying everything. It's very interesting. But my question is, concept as developed by Amartya Sen is quite rich. Very rich concept of human. But then the indicator is poor. And the indicator will not capture all of the developments of the concepts, specifically in the 1990s. What is the problem? Is it because the other aspects cannot be quantified? And is anything that cannot be quantified not to be taken into account? So, what's your take about this? And should we call the indicator the paradigm? Or we should leave the indicator as an indicator? And the paradigm is what Professor Saith developed, and then recognize at least that we cannot quantify it, that there should be some way of working with it, of assessing progress or lack thereof in putting it into it. Okay.
Are there any other questions before we return to Professor Saith? Yes, please, Nancy.
Hello. So reflecting on what you've been talking about today, I think I personally had the type of education where I was taught that the MDGs were a positive thing, and then the SDGs then after were a positive thing. And then I went through the track of the world of nonprofits, believing in this type of sector and believing that this would actually have an impact. And then I went like I did a 180 after being exposed to this type of industry, because it is an industry and it is definitely all about the money generation and about that flow of commercialization of what development is. My observation and question is, like, when you look at the HDI specifically, and we're talking about GDP and we're talking about health, we're talking about whatever else is included in the HDI, and you look at the hegemon that is very much superior in terms of GDP, but not faring very well in terms of health, in terms of education. How could you ever reach a type of arrangement that could actually show the real story, the real actual story that's taking place on Earth, in states and communities, when you have the hegemon that is very much in control of the situation, being completely uninvested in this type of story? So where do we go from this type of arrangement?
Please.
Thank you very much for this. I'm not sure I have good answers for all of you. Burnout society, is it related to human development in this way? Well, it's a good thing to reflect on. It's saying if you're educated, you have good health, and if you have a job, you're going to be plus on the indicator. But if you don't have a job, of course, then you're not on an individual level indicator, it's done at a group level. So it doesn't come that way. But what you're asking is really the question, which is, as an individual somewhere in your mind. So indeed, if the individual is not employed, does not have the income side of it, is going to score low. But I want to share with you, we were talking about it earlier. In many cases, this burnout phenomenon is quite strong. Sometimes people opt out of the race altogether, but sometimes, most often, people keep competing and work on it. You know, for if you're in East Asia, the pressure that you have on youth to actually do well in education, to look for a job, are absolutely phenomenal. So the idea that you're doing well through that kind of a competitive framework competing against each other, is I don't think that would belong to the philosophical notions of what is a good human situation. Because individually, the problem is that you're saying that approach is in a way tethered to methodological individualism, which is the heart of welfare economics, and he's there as a philosopher and welfare economist. That's where he is. So if you're looking at methodological individualism, then many of those things which I'm talking about should be very prominent in that manner. They should show up, but they cannot be captured in this human development approach. So there are any number of other things of this kind. By the way, you can expand this critique. You can go on about this MDGs. There were so many things missing, so many things wrong in the MDG. Seeing both of measures of inclusion, errors of omission, and errors of commission. And that's what led to the SDGs. The thing. So you say, okay, I include this, I include this, I include this, so you include virtually everything. And you carry on with all this. This is the bureaucratization really happens in this manner, in this huge way. I think it's seriously counterproductive. It takes away the meaning away from these things. So I think on the burnout, I would say that yes, the aspect of burnout of competition is a negative feature. But those negative features, they don't get counted in this at all. So I think that's as much as I would say about now the question of cooperation, how these and why this happens of these ideas. I think that's a very important issue. How is that a bad idea carries on? Now, I think it carries on with the type of material basis to it. There's a force, there's a societal and political force which underlies in a, you can say subliminally, it's not subliminal, but it is very much part of the system of the generation of knowledge and the purveyance of ideas. How does the economy work? What is efficiency? Is GDP good or not? The way that you actually see the discourse very powerfully influenced by the way academics work, by the way ideas come up and how they actually pervade in the media and how this, it's a construction of consent and of exclusion of radical ideas in this whole process. They're ideological in nature. And so the ideology of neoliberalism is very powerful. So you see in the US, most of the people who are supporting, people who are Democrats are supporting Mr. Trump, who's actually been, they're trying to prosecute him for actually attacks on Capitol. You have on the other side the UK as well, people who are left out of it altogether. The other ones who want to come out, they were the ones who voted for Brexit. So there is an idea of linked to the material side, but also very much about why you are the way you are. So this, so to take over the mind, that this is the primary differences we have. It's very nefarious, it's very subterranean, it's not immediately so. And if you actually fight it directly, you are thought to be from a different planet. You see, so you are excluded from discussions because you are seen to be passe or you are like this. So this becomes, so if you take US universities and say take economics and the economics also elsewhere, if you do not practice the economics of neoliberalism, I would call it neoliberalism, neoclassicism is very strongly supported. It is the academic platform, disciplinary platform of neoliberalism comes largely from neoclassicism. It's a relationship there between these. And if you were to question this, you would be regarded as being not an economist. And the critiques come largely from outside the discipline. And so economics actually is there. So if you're an economist who question this, they say go to business studies, go to development, go somewhere else. So economics is kept pure. And that's the idea. And it's kept pure, but it also becomes that it gets lobotomized. It doesn't have the possibility of introducing critiques except those points of question which can be absorbed into that framework itself. So which are those aspects are there. So you can also colonize institutional economics, evolutionary economics, and all this, but still with the idea of neoclassicism in the core. I think so Ibrahim has raised a very important question about the, as you said, the richness concept of human development and the indicator, and we criticize the indicator as a proxy for the paradigm. My question, as I said at the start, I'm not critiquing human development per se. So I would agree with that aspect. I also think that if over 30 years or 40 years you keep away and selling the HDI as the flagship, as the key thing for USP of the development approach, you've actually given away some of your justification. Because if you really believed in philosophically in human development, your first question would be, where does it come from? Why does it go up? So the question, why has the indicator gone up or gone down, stops at the idea of this index has come down. Education was like this, that was like this, GDP was like, well, why were they like that? Now, Professor Sen is one of the biggest proponents of education and so on in India. But why is it that this not happening? Why is it not? So they have to come directly into confrontation with the neoliberal position. And you have to stand up and say, this. And he does do that, because these days he speaks on many things. But on this whole aspect, the HD establishment in the UNDP kept silent, officially silent. We talked to them directly, of course, one-to-one, where this like you, indeed. But the program stayed a bit like this, and that was one of my critiques in it. The other thing is also about mythological individualism. I think that really does create a problem, because I may not be doing well because there's social exclusion. And how do I, so now here Sen links his, it legitimizes the human development approaches has a philosophical basis to it, which is why it also progresses so well in the notion of capabilities. Now, capabilities, you see, capabilities are things that you have reason to value. Yeah, that's a delivery individual. I have reason to value something negative. I don't like so and so. I have reason to value that. I have a reason to value that girls should stay at home and not go to school. I have a reason to value that. I have a reason to value FGM, and so on and so forth. So what's to justify the idea that what you have as a reason to value is automatically, by that reason itself, a good thing, and therefore not to be questioned. This means that every statement of every individual difference disappears. Now, this is a question which I won't answer, but I think it's a question I pose. That so when it comes to, for example, the other proponent of capability, the postmart and this one, and they develop it together, in our work, there's much more possibility of conflict, of constraints under which you actually choose between. So you say, okay, you have resources, then you choose the kind of capabilities which you have, that you want to pursue, or functions you want to pursue. But you may be constrained by your budget line. Why are you constrained by your budget line? You don't have land. Yeah, so there, something else is happening. Or there's an issue, there's lack of employment, something else. So it goes back into the wider areas from which the causation comes, and that's what I meant by the pathologies, which have produced the situation in which we are saying your human development level is this and that. But why is it so? It's coming from somewhere. But you're not pursuing it to that end. If you pursue it there, you'll be back into a very broader other development paradigm where you would say, this is not working, this is not the way to go. So the attack would be there, and then you would say, okay, how does it come out at the end? At this time, you're only looking at this and not relatively silent on that side. And you're right about Einstein. Not everything that's worth measuring is measurable, and everything that can be measured is not worth measuring. So I think that's very true. And I think that we made measurement into a fetish with the MDGs and the SDGs. And we are being driven by these numbers and these statistics as if they carry the meaning behind which we have a huge bureaucratic thing. We just see the target that's good enough. But actually, behind the targets is the reality which doesn't correspond to this. And there's a lot of, so it is a bureaucratic problem. So I think on the whole, we would agree. But your observation public management, I think, is very well taken. I think it's development also is taken to be a management clause. It's an issue of management. And so I think that's taken very well. I think the last one is about from Nadeem. I would say that everybody's brought up to think abilities and is very good. Yes, that's the whole point. You see, that's the power of the archaeological framework of going and measurement in this way. But question comes: how do you go about it then? I would talk about these things. I would look at there are so many other individual indicators you can look at. Because in education, do we ever trouble in India? I can't at this point in time. The textbooks in India are being revised all the time now, this last 10 years. and certain kinds of content is being taken out. That kind of content which is being taken out goes to the heart of what is a secular society. Okay? So history being rewritten by exclusion of certain things and being describing other histories as being the history of our people. Now, it's a democratic government. It has the right to appoint people to different education institutions. They have mandated the task that you should revise the textbook, which should be revised every 2-3 years. They revise it for the committees, and this is what comes out. Okay? Do we know how many people drop out, or we just took enrollments? You don't have figures on the dropouts. Do we have something where I or the others keep telling us people are unemployable because there are no skills? So can we say anything about the skills? What's the quality of education comes out? Nothing. So you only have it in terms of enrollments. Yeah. So this is where things like these things, which take over the whole, the whole narrative. And there's a huge gap in terms of the substance of what is really meaningful in it. That's what I said, there's lots of meaning. What are we teaching children in this regard? What happens to the content of things? And to my mind, there's so looking just at enrollments and saying here's an indicator is actually diverting your attention away from many of the aspects really are crucially important. Teachers, they've never been to a refresher course in 40 years. They're teaching something which is archaic. But do we bother about what teachers have been apart from the content? So, classroom the other day, the number of paid schools which are out. So there is so much in the education sector to look at in this way. So we just get it and say, oh, you perform well on this, not done well on this. It distracts attention. I think that's where a lot more things are happening there. Other agencies are doing it. But I'm here talking about this particular paradigm in this way. The paradigm, yes, I accept that, as I said, I'm not attacking human development. I think the content of it in the way that we actually define it should be closer to what Professor Saith has been saying in its essence about human development. But the entire approach, which has been launched in its name, has drifted away. So that's really if you were to take in all these studies at this point in time, inequality of income is going up like this. If you say the indicators of the health and education for many of them, they're not performing well at all. So you have these mismatches. And if you combine all that one thing into someone index or some GDP business, we are losing our capacity to discriminate and on which basis to say, do we like this policy or not? Do we like this approach or not? So that is it. I think I always, I've been a teacher for 55 years now. So I've always, why not, doing this. I like to provoke. I like to provocation with exaggeration. I confess to that. And the idea of exaggeration and provocation is to get you to say, I don't agree. And if you have to say, I don't agree, there must be a reason, which means you're listening, which means that you are now going to go and find out, yes, I disagree for this reason. And that's the whole idea of the job. So thank you for being there.
Thank you very much, Professor Ashwan. Thank you all for making the time. Please help yourself with coffee and snacks. Thank you. Yeah,